June is Men's Mental Health Month, and it's more than just a calendar marker. It's a necessary invitation. Men's Mental Health Month aims to shed light on the mental health struggles faced by men, dismantle societal stigmas, and encourage open conversations about men's mental well-being.
Hello, oh, oh, hello, oh, oh, hello, oh, oh, oh.
Welcome back to the DLOH. My name is Danisha Hebert, and I am your host. It's been a while since our last episode, but I am so excited to be back here with you. Across generations, many men have been taught to suppress emotional pain, to avoid vulnerability, and to equate strength with silence. But we now know that emotional repression doesn't protect anyone. It often leads to disconnection, stress, and unaddressed mental health conditions. One of the biggest barriers to healing is language. How we talk about emotions, how we name or don't name our experiences, and how those around us respond when we do. Phrases like "man up," "don't cry," or "be a man" may seem harmless, but they carry the weight of stigma. They reinforce the idea that expressing emotion is weakness. In reality, naming our emotions, anxiety, grief, anger, fear, is one of the most courageous things we can do. This episode is dedicated to unpacking the language of mental health and how we can use our words to empower, validate, and connect. Mental health is a part of everyday life, but often the language we use to describe our feelings or challenges gets distorted or misunderstood. Phrases like, "I'm so OCD," or "this is giving me PTSD," or "they're acting bipolar," have become part of a casual speech. But when we misuse these terms, we can unknowingly minimize serious conditions and make it harder for people to seek help. Understanding mental health vocabulary helps us communicate more clearly, not only with others, but with ourselves. It gives us a way to express what we're going through and invites compassion and support into our lives. Let's walk through a few terms that come up often and talk about what they actually mean. We'll start off with depression. Depression is more than sadness. It's a clinical condition that affects mood, thoughts, and physical well-being. It may show up as exhaustion, a lack of motivation, feelings of hopelessness, or difficulties enjoying things you used to love. It's real, it's common, and for the most part, it's treatable. It's helpful to have a clear definition of depression, but sometimes the definition doesn't always translate into what depression looks and or feels like in reality. What makes a disorder is how it disrupts your daily functioning. Your daily functioning is doing the things that you have to do and would like to do on a day-to-day basis. So that's getting up, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, putting on fresh clothes because you've done laundry, feeding yourself, going to work, connecting with friends and family at some point during the day, doing some type of activity that is either enjoyable or helpful for your mental, physical, spiritual wellness. Individuals with depression no longer have an interest in things that were once interesting. So if that is that person who has a healthy social life, they're very interested in spending time and connecting with friends and family. They're not doing that anymore when they're depressed. They may lose weight or gain weight, meaning they may not be eating or they may be overeating. They may not be sleeping or they may be excessively sleeping. So insomnia and hypersomnia. They may be moving or speaking more slowly than usual, that other people notice it. Or they may be restless and fidgety, that it's noticeable by the people who are usually around them. They may not be going to work or showing up to work on time. They may be missing it altogether. They may not be taking care of their hygiene, meaning they're not brushing their teeth. They're not taking a shower on a daily basis. They're not keeping up with their household chores, etc., etc. The most standout symptom of depression, and it really does characterize depression from ordinary sadness, is that there are feelings of worthlessness and feelings of hopelessness. Now, worthlessness sounds like what it is. It's when you don't think you are a valuable person. You might not think that people care that you don't show up to a function, or that they might not care if they don't hear from you for a month or two. There are more forms of worthlessness, but that is just one example. Hopelessness is described commonly as not being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, meaning you don't feel like there's anything that you can do about your circumstances. Now, sometimes depression isn't necessarily attributed to a specific person, place, or thing. Sometimes chemicals and hormones are just off balance, and it results in a person's experience being that of a depressive episode. And depressive episodes, you're seeing these symptoms consistently within the same 2-week period. That's the minimum. It can last for years, though. A few minutes ago, I spoke about what makes a disorder a disorder. And again, that's how it disrupts your daily functioning. But one other thing that is really important to consider with disorders like depression is that there is a spectrum of adaptability. And that spectrum is important. A person who is depressed, sometimes, depending on where they are on that spectrum, it can look like everything is fine from the outside looking in. They might still be showing up to the functions, and their depression is wholly internal, meaning they're not telling anyone about it. They're not saying anything about it to anyone. One of the reasons why I thought it would be helpful to talk about language and talk more about some of these disorders that we know of more commonly for Men's Mental Health Month is because of the way in which men have been socialized not to share their pain or their challenges. Sometimes people suffer in silence because They don't feel comfortable asking for help or seeking help, or they may dismiss what they're feeling. Again, depression is not just sadness. It's not just sadness. It's not just sadness. It is a legitimate disruption in a person's life. And again, because of the way that men are socialized, they may not recognize that they are suffering. They may literally brush it off and move on to the next task, event, or thing to take care of. So just consider that, whether it's for yourself or someone who you may know. Man, woman, they, them, etc., etc. If you're wondering, there are some assessments, some self-assessments that people can take to see if they're experiencing symptoms of depression. These assessments aren't diagnostic assessments. They're just assessments to gather data within a certain period of time. One of them is typically given at medical doctors' offices. It's called the Patient Health Questionnaire 9. The short form for that is the PHQ-9. And there's 9 questions that assess for symptoms of depression. Now let's move forward to anxiety. Anxiety can be both a natural response to stress or a persistent condition. Chronic anxiety might include things like excessive worry, racing thoughts, restlessness, or somatic symptoms or physical symptoms like a rapid heartbeat, sweating, and nausea. Listen, our bodies are set up to experience emotions and different states of stress. So there is normative anxiety or non-pathological anxiety. Things like running late. They might make someone feel overwhelmed or feel stressed. If we come across a spider, that is something that would make a person naturally be stressful, especially for our oldest part of the brain, which is the amygdala. Evolutionarily, spiders are something that our bodies are alert to unless we collect spiders or something like that. That means we've desensitized ourselves to spiders. Disordered anxiety is something that tends to be more persistent, more pervasive, and more disruptive. It can last almost on a daily basis for at least a period of 6 months if we're talking about something like generalized anxiety disorder. And with generalized anxiety disorder, you will have all of the symptoms that we covered so far, but there might not be a precipitant. And a precipitant is something that activates the anxiety. The nature of generalized anxiety disorder is that you are experiencing dysregulated anxiety about any and everything. It's generalized. There's a lot more to talk about with generalized anxiety disorder and other anxiety disorders, but we won't get into that today unless you all want to in a different episode. Let me know. Next, we have trauma. Psychological trauma occurs when we experience events that overwhelm our ability to cope. Things like abuse, violence, or even sudden loss. And that loss can be about a person, place, or thing. the loss of a person, the loss of a job, the loss of an experience, or the loss of a belief system. Its effects are often invisible, but they're profound, and they impact our emotional regulation, and they can even impact our relationships. Next, we have burnout. Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion, and it's caused by prolonged stress. This can be seen predominantly in the workspace, but it can also extend to other areas of our lives, like being in a caretaking role. Burnout is not laziness or weakness. It's simply a sign that our body is no longer in homeostasis. The balance is off, and we need to rest and recover. And finally, neurodivergent. This is a non-pathological term that includes people whose brain functions differ from the norm. And yes, I'm putting up air quotes when I say the norm, especially as we continue to learn more about neurodivergence and how much of the population actually experiences neurodivergence. Neurodivergence tends to come up when we are talking about individuals with ADHD, autism, or learning disabilities. Neurodivergence is not something to be fixed. It's more like something to be understood and supported. And for the sake of clarity, I've said this word a few times within the last few minutes. Non-pathological means that the condition or behavior is not considered to be a disease or a disorder. It's mainly used to emphasize understanding and not necessarily to label something as pathological, which would be as a disease or a disorder. We've all heard and maybe used mental health terms in ways that weren't accurate. Saying someone is so OCD because they like things organized, or calling a rough day traumatizing may feel harmless. But it's this kind of language that can water down the seriousness of actual mental health conditions. It can lead people who are struggling to feel invalidated or ashamed, and that can make those individuals not seek help because it feels like an overreaction to seek help. We don't joke about cancer or diabetes, and mental health deserves the same level of care and respect. Being intentional with our words fosters empathy, and it helps to dismantle stigma, which is still around in the mental health world. Words are powerful. They give us a way to explain what we feel, ask for help, and connect more deeply with others. You don't need to be a therapist to use thoughtful, accurate language. If you're checking on a friend or naming your own experience, every word you choose can open the door for clarity and connection. Here are some simple swaps to consider, if you will. Instead of saying I'm OCD when you're not, try saying something like I feel more at ease when things are organized. Instead of saying that's crazy, try that's really intense. And instead of I had a panic attack when you didn't, try I was feeling overwhelmed. Small shifts like these help to build a culture of understanding. Understanding the language of mental health is only the beginning. What comes next is how we use it in our relationships, workplaces, and our communities. Start by making space for people to speak. Don't rush to fix, just listen. Validate their experience without minimizing it. Pay attention to how language is used around you. Are people casually saying crazy, psycho, or bipolar to describe situations or moods? If you do hear that, consider challenging those moments in a reasonable way. One of those reasonable ways is trying to offer bridge building language instead. Some examples of bridge building language is, that sounds really heavy. Do you want to talk about it? Another example is, you're not alone in this. And another example is, it's okay to not be okay. We all play a role in normalizing mental health conversations and in choosing words that affirm rather than isolate. Healing begins with language, but grows through empathy. Today, we explored why mental health language matters. We defined terms like depression, anxiety, trauma, burnout, and neurodivergence. And we talked about how misuse of these words can feed stigma and misunderstanding. We also honored Men's Mental Health Month, highlighting how cultural expectations about masculinity can prevent emotional honesty. As we go forward this week, consider the power of the words you use, especially when talking about emotions, stress, and mental health. A small shift in language can lead to a big shift in compassion, both for yourself and for others. Until next time, take care and speak with intention.
To say hello.